Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be talking about a phenomenon that gets really frustrating, that is really counterintuitive. We've all been told if you find the bait, you find the bass, and that's what the textbook says, so it's got to be true. But sometimes that's not the case. So we're going to get into that real quick. But first, I just want to remind everybody, if you're watching this video and you enjoy this content, make sure you check out all my other videos. I do about a video a day on this channel. But also consider hitting that subscribe button and liking and sharing this content. That is the best way to support my channel and keep me motivated to keep doing this, because it does take a lot of time, but I do really enjoy it, and I love the community that we have on this channel. So thank you in advance for that. But let's get back to the topic. So, you know, again, we've been told from day one, if you find the bait fish, and we're more specifically talking about shad, you know, schooling bait fish in this scenario. But if you find the bait fish, you're going to catch some fish. But that's just not true sometimes. And if you fish for any length of time, you've probably had those days where you've run into the mother lode. You go into the back of this creek. Oh my gosh, there's bait everywhere. It's just a massive carpet of bait everywhere. You know, you can see them on the graph. They're just as thick as thieves in that creek. And you're like, we are gonna smash them. Now, the sad part is you could spend 3 or 4 hours in that creek and maybe catch one fish, maybe not ever get a bite. That is something that I have had happen to me numerous times. Other tournament anglers that I talk to, my peers, they confirm the same thing. We've all had that scenario happen, and it's very frustrating because you think that it's going to be easy, because you've always been told that if bait fish are around, bass are around. And that in part is true. The bass are around, but if you have too much bait fish, sometimes that means that it's going to be extremely difficult to get bit. And the reason for that is, at least this is my theory on it, you know, all I can go by is my observations. But my theory on that is that if you get into a creek, and I'm not talking about like, a bunch of different isolated big schools of shad. I'm talking about if you get into an area that has it's just everywhere. There's shad everywhere you cast. Or pretty much everywhere. If you get into those areas, the fish have so many options that you have to be so ultra, exact in your presentation as far as the size, the action, the shape, the color, all of that stuff, that it's just going to be so difficult, if not impossible, to get the bass in the area to bite, because they've already gorged themselves. They don't need to eat anymore. All they have to do if they get hungry is they just go eat some shad. It's easy for them. And this is something that you see happen on a smaller scale too, with bass that are schooling on, single schools of shad. They may be, 1 million shad in a school, a bait ball, and then you got like 20 bass chasing that bait ball around. The same thing kind of happens. Like, you can see fish actively feeding on the surface, going crazy, and you can cast your bait in there and they have no interest in it. They could be busting all around it and they won't eat your bait. And a lot of times that happens because you have to be exact as far as the shape, size, and color of that bait, because when bass have a lot of options in an area, usually the shad are about the same size overall. And so they get so hyper keyed in on that exact size and shape and color that anything else, they don't care about it. It's almost like trout fishing, where trout are very specific as far as what they want. They're not opportunistic like bass are most of the time. They know what hatch they need to key in on, because they can only expend so much energy. So they're very, very keen on like what type of insects they're going to be eating at any given time, especially if they're in current. Bass get that way too when there's a lot of bait fish around. They just get so hyper focused on it. So a few ways to combat that situation. And well, actually, let's kind of go back a little bit. So most of the time, this kind of scenario really happens during, you know, those periods where all the shad in a lake kind of congregate. So like the fall migration is a big one, you know, in the backs of creeks. You'll find some creeks that are just absolutely cram-packed with them. During the wintertime, that happens a lot. Summertime, not near as much. You don't really have that as much, but you also have it during the shad spawn too, you know, where there's a lot of shad, there's just too much, and there's some areas that you're just not able to catch fish. So those are the type of scenarios that you really will experience that. You know, if there's a good amount of shad, but they're pretty isolated, they're just kind of here and there, the schools, you're probably gonna have some success once you figure out the right presentation. But if you're in an area that's just like the graph is just lit up like it's just a grass mat, you know, run for the hills pretty much. But there's a few ways to combat that. The first thing is leave the area. You know, if you're in an area that has just a tremendous amount of shad, even if the fish are feeding on the surface, you may, you know, try a couple things to match the hatch the best you can, but if you're not getting bit, leave the area. You know, you're really just wasting your time in that spot. You know, you can kind of you know, fix or, you know, get some bites if you match the hatch really closely. Like on Chickamauga years ago, I learned during the fall that I had to really match the size of the shad in the backs of those creeks to the size of a little swim bait that I throw called the Z-Man minnows. And once I got the exact size and shape and color down, I could catch fish all day long. And so if you match the hatch exactly, you can potentially catch some fish in those areas. But I would really focus on areas that have shad activity, but not like a ton. You know, you have some schools here, you got some schools here. There's just schools meandering around. It's not a carpet. Another thing that you can do to combat this is to you know, do something completely different. You know, there's sometimes where if I have too many shad in an area, I'll do crawfish imitations or bluegill imitations. I'll do something completely different because the bass already have all the shad that they can eat. So I'm gonna throw in something just a little bit different, just a different flavor for them. And oftentimes that is a really good way to combat that type of bait fish pressure. And so, like, for instance, if I am catching them on a white chatterbait elsewhere on the lake because they're focused on shad, maybe in those areas with ultra prevalent shad, I might switch to like black and blue or green pumpkin or something like that. By doing something completely different and doing the opposite of matching the hatch, oftentimes that will help you, you know, get some bites in those areas. But overall, I think my best suggestion is don't get frustrated, just leave and find another area that isn't quite as packed with bait fish. So anyways, guys, thank you very much for watching. If you have any comments or questions, drop them in the comment section below. And other than that, make sure you like, share, subscribe. I'm gonna see you out in the water. Trust the process.